Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jaiya John, presenting Nursing the Nurse in You, honoring your life song.
Good morning, family. How we doing? We're good? All right. I felt your spirit when I came into the hotel. Y'all have good energy. I want to thank Linda for that kind introduction. Y'all, my head is big enough as it is. You didn't have to blow me up into high def like this. That's kind of crazy. I'm a little self-conscious. So just remember the screen adds a few inches in circumference. All right? Wow, y'all have been good to me already so much. I just want to thank everyone who has so kindly supported my participation and warmly welcomed me here at the hotel. So I have to thank Devin and Deborah and Tia and Sharon and Linda and Sally and Hannah, Janine. Who else am I missing? And the voice of Todd in the back on the AV. Give it up for Todd. I've never been introduced by God before. That was pretty cool. That was pretty cool. Put that on my resume. So, speaking of which, I have to always give thanks above for the glorious blessing that brings us all safely together, right? We should never take for granted our safety and well-being. I just flew in yesterday from, where was I? I get confused. I was in Dallas for the last week. Yeah, I knew there were some Texans here, right? Congratulations to you Mavericks fans. And maybe for you Spurs fans and Rockets fans next year. There's always next year. Y'all say no. You must be from Dallas. Okay, all right. So I spent a week out there with 1,000 Texas Department of Family and Protective Service, CPS, supervisors. So that's what I was doing for the last week while you were doing your thing out here. And the week before that, I was in Michigan with 150 foster youth. I have a pretty cool life. This is my life. I am blessed to spend time with children and youth around the country and around the world, especially those who have been devalued in some way, often by virtue of poverty or culture or language or challenges with learning that we call learning disability when we could call it a learning distinction, or we call it a physical disability when we could call it a physical distinction. Instead of focusing on the disability, we could focus on the ability, and that's what I get to do when I spend time with young people. Many of them separated from family because of family crisis, dealing with drugs and alcohol within their family home, or incarceration, adjudication, foster care, adoption, guardianship, kinship care, immigration, political and social refugee status, etc., etc. Young people who've been stigmatized and devalued for a myriad of reasons, and I get to spend time with those beautiful souls. And I also am fortunate to spend time over and over again with the adults, the grown folks, the grown ones who care enough to serve their lives. And so I'm very, very grateful to be here today with you all. I've been traveling for 4 months straight, pretty much. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, so I was able to actually drive down here today, but I haven't hardly been there. I've just been everywhere else, and this is sort of the last stop for me before I get to switch gears and hang out for the summer with my 12-year-old daughter. We always do our daddy-daughter thing for the summertime. So you are the best coming last, and I thank you so much. Thank you so much. So I saw how close you are to the zoo. I hope you got a chance to go check out the wild creatures over there. Maybe you got a chance to also see the animals while you were at the zoo. That would have been cool. You got that, right? I love my DC people. Actually, those are tourists. The crazy people that you saw at the zoo, those are tourists. Those aren't the locals. What else? When I came in and saw Devin, this morning, one of the first things she said to me was, Jaiya, we have a dental panel going on. So I thought she was trying to tell me something about my grill. I thought she was trying to say something about I said, do I need some work? What's going on? I'm a little jet lagged, so my brain's confused. No, I'm just kidding. It's beautiful to see a room full of caring souls. Within my own family, two of my aunties, my grandmother, and a sister of mine are all nurses. Yeah, give it up. And I feel you and I are kindred in spirit, because since I was a child, even though I thought as a child and acted as a child, and spoke as a child, I had this old soul, this old spirit. And it always called to me. It was always burning for me to go to where need was and suffering was, to run into those flames where other people run away and to be there. So even as a small child, my mom told me a few years back, she said, I remember one time, maybe middle school, I came back towards your room and there was like a line of your friends waiting outside the door to talk to you. She said, it's always been like that with you, you seem to just attract and gravitate toward where need is. And I had forgotten that in my own mind until she reminded me. And it's true, my whole life, I feel my entire purpose for being revolves around the spirit and the energy of love and compassion, of service, of servanthood, of servitude to lives, to beautiful lives, especially those of children. And that's who you are. So in our brief time here together this morning, extended into the PM, I hope and pray that I can simply be a vessel to let a message of inspiration come through and return to you, to help lift your hearts and souls and spirits, and to send you forward feeling good about who you are, remembering who you are, remembering the essence and the nectar and the manna of this work that you do, recognizing, hopefully, the sanctity and the sacredness, the holiness of this work that you do. For we live in the United States of America, and while we celebrate our athletes on ESPN and our entertainers and our politicians, we are a young nation and we have not yet learned to celebrate and honor and cherish those who are in the trenches with our children and youth. That's you. And so I pray that I can be that for you to send you on your way. And don't think that you're slick either. I know that you've been here for a few days and it's the holiday weekend, the Independence weekend, and I know that you're raring to go. I kind of feel like that K-12 teacher who has to give a presentation to his class on the last period of the last day of the school year before summertime. I know what's going on. I know you're already out the door. I know half of you already left, and the rest of you, your mind's out the door. You're like those children at your school that are just kind of gidgety and fidgety and just anxious and excited to go, right? You want to go back home. You want to get out into the holiday weekend. So I appreciate you staying around and being receptive and open and focused for this moment together, this opportunity for us to remember you and to salute you, okay? Thank you. My heart and my breath are poetry, so as I share with you, I'll probably be dipping into some poetry here or there. And to lighten the mood, let me share this piece with you. I'm going to adapt. Most of these were written in this piece as a celebration and honoring of those who serve young lives. That's you. But I'm going to, as I recite this, adapt it a little bit to make it clear that we're speaking of school nurses here. And by the way, congratulations, Linda, for your new tenure, which begins, I guess, in this very moment, actually as you got off the stage. So I wish you all good things going forward in your position with this beautiful association. This is a good group to be a part of. Yes, you're welcome, you're welcome. And it occurs to me I might be one of about 3 men in the entire room. Is that true? I don't see. If I have any brothers in the audience, raise your hand. And I don't mean blood brothers. 1, 2, 3. So there's about 4 of us out of about 1,000. That's all right. I like that. I like that ratio. That's all right. So this is you. This is you speaking, school nurse. And you're saying, At the end of a long school year here, now we're in July, but it's been a long school year, and you've been toiling in your craft, and you've been doing this, some of you, for years. Some of you, this might have been your first year, but you're feeling things, and you've been through a lot, and you learned some lessons, and you want to share with your colleagues, your co-workers, your school nurse association, this story. And you say, the last straw came when I showed up at the staff meeting with toilet paper sticking out of the heel of my pumps. That was the last straw. And it was a humiliating trailer on much less than my wedding day. To top it off, a corner of my skirt was hitched up in the back, and it was stuck in the waistband of my hose, revealing my caboose in all its glory. This on a day, of course, when I had worn my tattered Minnie Mouse panties to school. They were a gift from my niece, who, if she had been there in that moment, would have been on the floor howling and crying with laughter, along with every one of my co-workers, including my administrator, the principal, and her 10-year-old son, who, of course, just had to choose that day to get suspended from school. And I'm just warming up. I drove to work that morning with the gas cap dangling from the side of the car as I raced to not be late. You see, I ran over my daughter's formerly AWOL pet frog as I backed out of the garage. I heard the squish just as I turned on the radio, and I thought the sound was a signal static until I heard the most blood-curdling scream come from my daughter, followed by her hideous death stare directed at yours truly. We held the impromptu funeral in the backyard as my daughter prayed out loud for God to forgive her murderous mother. Finally, I left for work, applying mascara in the rearview mirror as I turned the street corner, hit a pothole, and stabbed a streak of black cosmetic across my forehead. At the stoplight, I thought I would finally be safe to put on some lipstick, and that's when the dump truck behind me blasted its horn to alert me to the green light. I shrieked at the blast, jarring the lipstick straight up my nose. At this point, I looked just a hair shy of insane. Finally, at the staff meeting, once my backside was covered and the toilet paper removed, and after the laughter died down into fits and spurts, my supervisor, my administrator, asked me with a face near to bursting whether I had any more outcomes to share with the group. We never did manage to conduct a serious meeting that day. Now, before I could crawl under my desk and hide, my husband called to inform me that it was raining and our dearly departed frog had floated up to the surface in the yard. And dear, could I come home and comfort our child, because she sure was upset, and after all, I was good at those kind of things. That was the last straw. I'm telling you. The next day I told the school I was leaving the planet and would return when I was human again. I told my husband not to call me even once if he valued his well-being. I checked into a resort, got a deep tissue massage, then a Swedish massage, a hot stone massage, followed by a pedicure, manicure, body wrap, scalp massage, and jacuzzi. I ate strawberries and chocolate in bed to a series of old romance movies, and I listened to Italian operatic promises. And at night I cried at the beauty of the full moon set in a clear blue-black sky. I ordered room service when I wanted, and I soaked myself silly in bubble baths and went on long walks in tall woods. Wrote love letters to my closest friends and joined some children playing stickball in the street. I picked wildflowers for myself and sang unabashedly with the morning birds. When my soul was satisfied, I checked out of the resort, amazed at what it felt like having taken care of me. I charged this whole affair to myself, to the account that we kept, my husband and I kept, for rainy days, the one that he pilfered from for his golf habit, which paid him in nothing but curses and bogeys. I had come to realize that if I was going to do this work as a school nurse of serving those young lives in need, I had better be willing every once in a while to go crazy loving myself, lest crazy come and carry me away. In the end, our beloved frog was laid to rest properly, and a stand of sunflowers grew from that very ground. As for me, I've managed to keep my bloomers under cover and my head above life's wild waters. I've also learned that I can do this work. I just need a little self-loving sometimes. Thank you. Thank you. Nursing the nurse in you. I feel that I was born to be a healer, and Like you, we understand that being of a healing nature, a healer's nature, brings with it many beautiful blessings into our life, but it also brings a certain jeopardy, I'm so thankful for this opportunity to be with you. I want you to understand what you meant to me when I was a child. I was born, as Linda shared with you, into the foster care system. I was literally born property of the system and ward of the state. When they cut the umbilical cord, they rushed me out of the room. My birth mother, Mary, never knew whether she had even had a boy or a girl. That's how quickly the separation was. She never got to hold me or smell me or feel me up against her. And many of you understand that this cycle of well-being that we call pregnancy and childbirth, it doesn't end when the baby comes out. The actual end is when the mother brings the baby to her breast, to her chest. The mother smells the divinely unique scent of the baby. It's like a fingerprint, that unique, the scent of the baby. The baby smells mom. The largest organs in the body, the skin of the baby and mom, begin to communicate hormonally and chemically. That's the beginning of their post-birth intimacy. Only in that moment does mom's brain begin to signal the body to flush with hormones, a sign that pregnancy itself is over. The milk comes. The mother gets to complete the full cycle of knowing that this season, this experience, this birth of life is concluded, only when she begins to bring the baby to herself. I mention that because there are many cycles in life that the children that come to our schools and are charged with learning and growing and developing and discovering themselves and becoming themselves. Many of these life cycles that we as a society tend to assume of a, quote, normal child, the, quote, standard child. We assume that they have had the opportunity to complete these cycles. And you know as well as I know that many of the children that populate and inhabit our schools in this nation have had those vital, priceless, precious cycles interrupted, paused, aborted, severed, cleaved because of crisis in the home, stress, duress, challenges, even if it's as subtle as a family moving from a community to another community and the child having to start up again at a new school. Cycles have not been completed, and whether it's in a mother who's just given birth or a child who's in your school, there is consequence and repercussion when cycles have not been completed. And also we have to remember this morning that you have your own cycles of life that need their completion. And when we don't allow that, it affects not only our personhood, but our servanthood. So I was born that way. I started my life that way. No name, no home, no family, a child of the system. And I take that as a great blessing, not a complaint. A great blessing. Because I had to learn slowly through this large, thick skull over the course of my childhood season and into adulthood that our circumstance in life is not inherently ever a negative thing. It can often be a difficult and challenging thing, but the way in which we learn to relate to and use our circumstance to become our truest, fullest self is the true opportunity that is there for every single one of us. When I was a child, because I was still a child and had not yet learned what it meant to become a man, to become a human, meaning a living soul who knows how to love himself and honor himself and respect himself, who understands how to engage himself in the learning process at school, in the social process of being a classmate, an age peer mate on the playground and in the cafeteria and in the hallways and at the lockers. I was not yet that child. I was the child who was lost in the wild, self-hating, self-rejecting. Lord, how come me here? I wished I never was born. Or me, the foster child, singing in the soul. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, long way from home. This was me in your school. And I'm telling you that I was so discomforted by being in this world. Beyond my inherent intelligence, beyond my loving family and supportive, sacrificing family that I was blessed with, beyond the strong school system in Los Alamos, New Mexico, which, by the way, has been evacuated for the last week. I hope you all have heard about that. That's the second time. My family, we had our home burned down in the 2000 forest fire, and that fire is burning again now. Jeopardy is a part of our human lives. And for me, I've always had it on my heart for us to focus more on the true nature of a child's experience in school, which is to assume that our children come to us with everything not going well, with things going wrong. That's nature, that's life. And if our paradigm, our model of service, nursing, healing, teaching, administering, disciplining, guiding, mentoring, coaching, instructing, assumes this non-normality to what we tend in our culture to assume as a normality, I feel that we can go so much further into serving these children in the ways that they need. I was this little black boy, ultimately raised in a white family, in a white-dominated Los Alamos, New Mexico, in a white-dominated society, separated from the root and my biological family. One of the things that this did for me was to separate me from myself, of my sense of beauty and belonging and wholeness and humanness. And so when I showed up at school, I was nearly mute. I didn't speak. And this went forward all the way into college. And I'm not exaggerating. The teachers would call my mom during the day. We don't understand what's going on with him. We don't know whether he's even learning because he won't open his mouth. You understand the intimate relationship between the psychological, emotional, and spiritual and cognitive well-being of a child and that child's physical manifestation. You understand that. I was carrying so much stuff. I didn't have a handle on it. Didn't understand that this was my divine, purposeful life. And it hurt. And so I would show up at your school and I would be so afraid. I was afraid of my own shadow. I was afraid of my friends. I was afraid of my peers. I was afraid of the teachers and any adult authority figure. I was afraid because I just didn't know who I was. I was lost, see? And what I needed was an adult somewhere in that school building, just one adult somewhere in that school building that I could find. I didn't care. As a child, you do not care whether that person is the principal, the assistant principal, the janitor, the custodial crew, the lunch lady, as we called her back in the day, the playground monitor, a teacher. There's no hierarchy. When a child is struggling to get her or his grasp on just being comfortable in the world so that he or she can learn fully and grow and blossom totally, such a child doesn't really care for the professional hierarchy of how many degrees we have and what colleges and universities we went to and what neighborhood we grew up in and what family we came from and what clothes we wear to school and what titles we have and what ranks of superiority and seniority that we adults have in the school building. I just wanted to find one soul as an adult in that school who would give me not knowledge, not data, not learning, not to instruct me, but just give me the goodness of her spirit to help me feel something warm and tender and compassionate so that I could be in that cloud for a moment and just feel safe. You understand? Just feel safe. When we, as children, manifest physical health conditions and challenges, we all know in this room that one of the things that does is it opens up in a child our emotional and spiritual vulnerability. When we are suffering physically and having physical challenges before us, it somehow makes our spirit raw. We become more needy of someone to put their proverbial emotional arms around us, their arms of heart, and say, child, you're safe with me. I care about you. I don't care what grade you got on your last test. I don't care what you did on the FCAT or whatever the standardized test is called last month. You know what I mean? I don't care whether the teachers get together at the beginning of the school year and start talking about you and list all the negative things first and then assign you to the teacher over here who has the less seniority because they don't want to deal with you. I don't care. Come into my office and let me show you how much I care about you. And guess who that was for me in elementary school and middle school and high school? Might have been even in college too. It was you. It was you. It was always you. I'm here really as a child. Now, I don't look like a child to you, but please strain your imagination and remember me as a little boy. This little boy, just lost, black, fostered, and mute, self-hating, internalizing all the ideas that this society has about my skin, about my origin, about my fosteredness. Internalized it. I bought it all. I believed it all. I said, that's what you think of me? That's how you look at me? That's how you deal with me? That's how you're afraid of me? That's how you're uncomfortable with me? I believe you. You're an adult. You're the adult world, and so you must know what you're talking about. So I must be a monster. I must be unattractive. I must be unworthy. I must be less intelligent, incapable of learning. Nobody comes up to me as the child and asks me, do you possibly think you might be interested in the advanced placement courses? No. So I assume, well, that's for those children that look not like me and act not like me and seem to have something that I don't have. And please don't get confused in the La Brea tar pit of race. I'm saying that was my experience, but there is something about every single child that comes into our schools, that makes her or him at jeopardy of feeling the same way. That horrible self-identity that says there's something wrong with me. She might be the class valedictorian. She might be getting straight A's. But you know what we did with the straight A student at our school? In Los Alamos, up in those mountains, back in the woods. Please forgive us, man. Please forgive us. We would hide out in the woods and we would throw fruit from lunch at her from a distance. This is what, that meanness that children get into because they're struggling with their own, how they feel about themselves and their own life. You think we treated that straight A student well? We were horrible to her. We were horrible to her. So what I'm saying is, whether it's because the young lady comes from El Salvador, her parents are from San Salvador, and Spanish is being spoken in the home, and so she's very self-conscious about who she is in the classroom. She feels like something's not really right with her. She's not normal. We're always wanting that sense of normalcy, right? Or it's the boy in the wheelchair. Or it's the young man from the migrant family, the field working family. Or the child who's been adopted overseas from China. Or the little girl who's taller than all the boys. That's my daughter. Poor thing. She came out at birth, she had paddles for feet. Just like me. And she had these hands. Poor thing. I looked at her, I said, oh, I'm sorry, sweetie. It's going to be rough for you. And she's like a sunflower. She's just slender, no width, no weight on her, whatsoever, just slender, but she just keeps growing for the sky, right? 12-year-old, about 5'9" or something, I don't know. I said, you hang in there, sweetie. By high school, those boys will catch up. You just hang in there. Whatever it is, children come to us so sensitive. And I believe I wasn't the only child that sometimes it wasn't that I was manifesting migraines for real because of what I was carrying on the inside and didn't know how to articulate or express. I was physically manifesting with migraines and bloody noses and hives and all kinds of things because of my spirit, my interior reality and condition. But I don't think I was alone. I think a lot of children, we also then exaggerate those physical manifestations or even pretend we have stuff that we don't just so we can get a chance to go to the school nurse's office. Because somehow, man, we know that's oasis. That's safety, right? That's like we don't get to get bullied there. We don't have people looking at us crazy there. We go into that office and maybe the music's playing all nice. Maybe not, but that school nurse, that voice always seemed to be so tender and soft and gentle. She seemed to care. She seemed to care. Give it up. Give it up. Do not be shy. Do not be shy about celebrating yourself. That's the thing that this culture teaches you not to do. Teachers, social workers, nurses, child servants. We teach you, and by nature you tend to be humble. We understand you're not Donald Trump. You're not the CEO tycoon mentality. You're not looking for glory. You're not that athlete. You're not that entertainer. You're not that politician. We understand you have a humble nature. But I'm saying it's also good for you to learn how to celebrate yourself, to love yourself. You need that because the work isn't easy. So you were my oasis, and you helped me. And if you think that I'm making a mountain out of a molehill in terms of your significance, I believe you are mistaken. The reverberation that you leave in the life of a child, even if I just 3 or 4 times during each school year got to be in your office and in your presence and have you put that Band-Aid on me or whatever it was, and just got to leave your office feeling like, oh, that kind of felt good. And it was a departure from the way I felt the rest of my day because of your spirit and your heart. Even if that's all that my exposure was to you, or these children's exposure is to you, do you understand how great that is? Do you understand that those are seeds of security, stability, solidity, resilience, coping, endurance, hope, faith, and things not seen? Evidence that somebody in the world cares about you as a child. You're greater than you realize. You are. You are. You are. You were my bridge over troubled water. You gave me a chance to make it long enough so that I could get a handle on myself, stop going crazy and being so self-destructive and destructive to others. And I slowly figured it out that, wow, people care about me, so I better start caring about myself. You were that bridge. And you helped me get from that season of childhood into the beginnings of adulthood, where I can begin to heal and repair myself, continue to grow. And only because of people like you in my life, actually, literally, did I stay alive and not become a statistic, like so many other foster children and other children from crisis and family disruption. I was on the verge, believe me. Believe me. The people like you gave me a chance to become a professor so that I could work in the lives of young people on a college campus and help them to help themselves and heal themselves, so that I could become a youth advocate and a mentor, so that I could become a father, a healthy, vibrant, positive older brother to my siblings, so that I could become a healthy spirit in the world. I shared with the CPS workers in Texas last week. I said, first we asked those who had served in the military to stand on this Independence weekend, and we showed our appreciation. And then I asked a simple question. I said, any of you who believe you have served the lives of family or children, please stand. And of course, like you, out of that humble identity, they looked at each other. They weren't used to standing and being acknowledged. And they finally all stood up because the whole room was such a social servant. And I asked them to show their appreciation for each other. The thing that I wanted to focus on in that moment for them was that although we are good in our culture about uplifting and celebrating our young men and women who go overseas to places like Iraq and Afghanistan, Libya, Sudan, Somalia, wherever it is in the world, and risk their lives and give their lives in service to humanity first, society second. We quickly identify that those young men and women are worthy of celebration. But when I, a child of the system, a child of that season of life where you're walking through a valley of despair and you can't see the light, for someone like me, I understand very clearly that true terror begins in the heart and the mind of our children right here in the United States as they go to school, not knowing what's going to happen to them when they get home. As they go to school, knowing that the only chance they have to eat that day will be at the school. And what happens when school's out and it's summertime or it's a holiday? How am I going to feed my belly and not go to bed starving? True terror begins in the heart and the mind of a child who goes to our school, who's dealing with family crisis, anger, and abuse, and neglect, and violation, and abandonment, not knowing who's going to come through the bedroom door in the next moment and assault her again. True terror. And so for me, as a child who lived through horror, personal horror, meaning interior horror, largely created in my own mind, I need you to understand something. You, for me, are the first line, the first warrior in what is the true war on terror. Because children who are going to our school right now, our school here in Maryland, Virginia, California, our collective school, I'm using that in the singular, our collective culture of school. These children, by virtue of the way in which we help them to heal themselves and tap into their woundedness, these children are the very children that are either going to grow up and become creators in the world or destroyers. They will become either the beautiful lives, the beautiful, productive lives, or the terrorists. And so for me, I have to stop and say thank you because you are serving in the war on true terror. I want to let you know that. You are. At the staff meeting, the workers, the nurses discussed their various roles and responsibilities. Midway through, one nurse interrupts with a pensive voice, and she says this to her colleagues at the school, the teachers, the staff, the administration. She says, "We have neglected a priority item, failed to even include it on our agenda. The subject that we must address is that of our collective responsibility. I need no planner, scheduler, pen, or pad to write this down amongst my many tasks. I just need a heart, a mind, a reason, the truth. I require faith and determination. Our responsibility is the child, and our role is to serve the child. We have one responsibility regardless of our title, one role. Our job descriptions, titles, and positions are secondary. In many ways, they are in fact illusion in this great and singular task." This nurse goes on, "We are all vulnerable, needful, dependent souls, tethered to each other. We are wet and soaking in the same stream, the side stream of devalued human beings. I would like to share a story," she says. "I left this little boy a quick note on blue paper, and it said, 'Son, before you were ever judged by a person on this planet, you were judged to be beautiful and worthy of life. The breath of life itself was your entrance ticket, your stamp into the club. You were born worthy. You already passed your greatest test. Something great thought you priceless, enough to be created. And the rest of your life is not an audition, it is a grand performance. You have already been chosen to grace the stage. Now dance, sing, and make your point to the world. We grown folks are not your director, we are your audience. Greatness itself directs you, and we can only witness and learn.' I saw the boy," she said. "I saw him tuck the note in his pants pocket, and I prayed it would not get washed in the laundry. Slowly, his demeanor changed over the remainder of the school year. On the last day of class, he tugged at my arm. He said he needed to talk to me. Outside on the main entrance steps of the school, he shared his secret with me, saying, "Ma'am, it has not been easy for me being in this place. All of you adults have different titles, which seems to make you pull on us students in competing ways. You each take a chunk out of me daily to feed your sense of control. I feel like a minnow pulled to pieces by frogs who will not leave their lily pads to join me in the water. I keep thinking that if they did join me, they could feel what it is like for a minnow, a small little minnow like me. When you gave me that note, I did nothing with it at first. I thought you were just another frog preying on me with a note for a tongue. Eventually, I opened up the note, though, and I read it, and instantly I felt safer here in this place, this school, where you are. Not a predatory thing, but a big minnow who actually wants to swim with me. I wish all the adults here would forget their roles and titles and remember me. Thank you." One more. This is for you too. At the podium on the stage, in the late evening of the school nurse's retirement party, she graciously receives the applause of her family, friends, colleagues, and students present and past. Her eyes still twinkle after all the years, and she speaks into the microphone. She says to the audience, "Tonight I wish to tell the truth. So much of this work that we do in caring for our children, our students, becomes tainted with the lies that we tell ourselves so that we may retain a measure of dignity. Tonight, as you honor me for my career as a school nurse, I feel it is only right that I honor the truth of what I have been so that who comes after me might dare to attain a higher service." About midway through my career, a boy showed up in my class. And about a week after the fall term began, I started to notice him. He wore blue shoes. His clothes smelled of urine each day. His hair was a matted mess. His breath stank. His skin was ashy. He was shy, quiet, withdrawn. Each class subject that I taught, he spent with his head down, drawing in his notebook. You know these ones. He ate his lunch alone in the cafeteria. The other children were not so much mean to him as thoroughly disinterested. His build was lithe, emaciated. He ate little, always mumbling to himself as he finished the food. I was concerned about this boy, and my calls to his mother went unreturned. He walked to and from school, so I never saw his mother pick him up. I did not have to, but the truth is, I chose to conclude many things about this boy in blue shoes. Finally, I decided to visit his home. His mother invited me in. I sat on a sunken, tattered couch and drank the sun tea she offered me. She said, "I'm so sorry I've not called you back. I've been afraid of what you might have to tell me about my son. I know he is struggling at school. He comes home crying. Our family has been through so much these last few years. My son has had to bury his grief so he can take care of his brothers and sisters. I work too much and my heart is frail since I lost a child and my husband in the same cruel moment. I have seen my depression become my son's. I am so scared and so lost, and I feel that I have let us all down. Last week he came to me in my bedroom and I knew he heard me sobbing. The lights were low. He said, 'Mom, don't cry. We're going to make it through.' I'm so sorry," he said. "I have disappointed you at school. It's just so hard there right now. None of the students like me. I don't like myself. And the worst part is I can feel every single one of my teachers not liking me too. If just one of those big people there looked at me differently, the adults, I believe that I would have an air pocket to breathe when I go there to school. And if I could breathe there, I believe I could finally grieve there and let all my pain go. Instead, I hold it all day long, and it's hard to learn like that." In that moment, the school nurse says, "In that moment on the couch, I realized that I could have been that one adult in the school to pierce his obstruction and let in his breath. I could have stopped his suffocation if only I had not concluded him in such horrible ways. From then on, I would choose to see him more beautifully. And that was the day that I learned a lesson I've carried all the way up to this retirement night. Our conclusions touch lives, and our touch is permanent. Thank you. So I was spending time sharing a message and time and spirit with a group of social workers, some of them school social workers. We were in Gallup, New Mexico. Any of you from Nuevo Mexico, La Tierra Encantada? Anybody in the room? 1, 2. That's it. 3. I see you. So I was born in Albuquerque, La Ciudad, cerca del Rio Grande, and I grew up in Los Alamos in the mountains. And so for me, I grew up around a lot of Native American communities, those pueblos, Santa Clara, San Felipe, Santo Domingo, etc., the Diné, Navajo communities, Hopi, Apache. And I also descend, obviously, from Africa Tree, but also from Cherokee. It's a big part of me, and I grew up, feeling an affinity, felt safe with that spirit. And so for me, it's very close to my heart to do work with Native young people who, in many ways, especially the tribal youth there on the res, are actually living an experience that is essentially a whole different country than this one. A whole different country. And so they're carrying things with them that make it very difficult for them to go through the school process, K through 12, in a very vibrant and productive way. It's very difficult for them to ultimately tap into their full promise and potential. And of course, there's a lot going on in their homes. And you understand this relationship. So much of what you deal with in your offices and with the children around the school has its origin point and its root in the home. Whether that's a physical challenge, a medical challenge, an emotional one, it's all tied together. It's the same thing. And oftentimes it's really growing out of the generational roots of those families. You know this. So I had the opportunity to spend time a couple of years ago in Gallup with some Diné, means the people, which is how they call themselves. Navajo was the European conquistador terminology. Diné social workers. And an elder, he came up to the front of the room at some point in time, and he began to share with us the history of what it means to be a social servant, a healer in the Diné community and tradition. And he said, our people, we have been taught by our ancestors for many hundreds of years about the sanctity and sacredness of certain souls who come into the world. And we have learned, because our culture has taught us, to pay attention when these souls come. We say, a social servant has come, go beat the drum. When a child is born, we start paying attention immediately, because we want to pay attention to her characteristics as a person, her spirit. We want to understand who she is meant to be in the world. And he said, what we do is when we begin to notice that this little boy or girl very quickly, and children show us very quickly who they are, correct? They can communicate in the womb. What used to be almost a 10-month, we've abbreviated it in different ways, right? But what used to be a nearly 10-month period of gestation in the womb, mothers know this, that the communication that goes on during that period of time is astounding. It's like the relationship between a piano player and the piano. Those keys are so finely tuned, and the vibration is so finely aligned the child is able very quickly to let mom know, I liked or didn't like what you just ate. I liked or didn't like what you just drank, what you just put into your body, my body. I liked or didn't like your tone of voice that you used in speaking to another person, because the vibration of it carried through to me. I didn't or did like that person who you were just speaking with, because their vibration carried through you to me. I like the music you're playing today, Mom. Mom, could you please turn over so that I could get more comfortable in this bed with you? Constant stream of communication, right? So by the time that child is born, mom at least, the rest of the world's clueless, right? Especially dad. Sorry, guys. But mom has an intimate understanding of who this child is. She already knows whether this child is hyperactive, right? The pre-exposure ADHD, ADD, OMG, this child's coming, get ready, because this child is hyper. This child is wound up. Mom already knows what kind of personality that child has, what kind of taste that child has, sleep cycles, wake cycles, all this stuff. So the DNA elder was saying, what we do as a community is to get to know the child in the same way as much as we can as the mother has, as soon as the child is born. When we notice that that boy or girl seems to have a big heart, seems to care about others a lot, we start to really pay attention. When that child begins to run to the suffering of others instead of away from it, we pay more attention. When that child is not just loving and compassionate, but feisty, because you're feisty, we really start paying attention, because now we know that this child is very likely born to be a servant to souls, especially children. We know that this child has love, compassion, feistiness, meaning the fire, the strength, the courage, the will, the fortitude to stand up for what is right and to stand against what is wrong, to be an advocate, to be an activist. All of these things that you do in your job, which hardly has to do simply with medical considerations. You're having to advocate to coworkers and staff. You're having to educate people within the school district. You're having to be a leader. You're having to be a listener. You're having to be all these things. And the DNA elder said, by the time that child's 3 or 4 or 5, we already have a pretty good idea. This child is born to be a healer. Once we recognize that, once our elders have recognized that this is a healer amongst us, we ceremonially gather around that child. We begin our community process of preparing and building and strengthening this person for her or his life purpose. He says, the DNA elder, that the thing about a child born to serve children and be a healer is that such a child will give everything in that nursing service to others. But that same child will become an adult who has a proclivity, a tendency, a gravity, a vulnerability, a deep spirit habit in which he or she often will not give enough to take care of the self. And so the DNA elder says, we know in our culture that our social servants, especially those who serve children and help facilitate the self-healing of children, we know that such souls are sacred. We know that. We celebrate our servant souls. We don't celebrate our athletes and our entertainers. We appreciate them, but we hold as sacred our soul servants. And we also know that they need our cultural community help to support them and encourage them and remind them that you are a human being and you need to take care of yourself. And so the DNA elder, he spoke this story because he said, we have an understanding as a native people what it means to go through generations of dysfunction and dehumanization. We understand the signs of it and the manifestations. We know that you can spend your life serving the needs of children in the schoolhouse, but not serve your own emotional, spiritual, heart and soul needs. And that when you do that, what happens is predictable. You will begin to manifest signs of unwellness. You will begin to need nursing, which you could have been providing yourself all along. But your body will begin to speak to you because our body is our closest friend. This is still the Dine elder. They said the body, he says this, he said, you gringos, which means anyone who's not native, he said, you always are fond of saying dog is a man's best friend. He said, your body is your best friend. It will always be with you wherever you go. It will never lie to you. If you put the wrong things in it, it will let you know in various ways. If you neglect exercising it, it will speak to you. If you neglect pouring the salve of peace, serenity, tranquility, meditation into your heart will begin to crack and break. If you flood your mind with awful thoughts and negativity and despair and fear and doubt and stress and weariness, your mind will begin to cave in and erode like a sandcastle constructed by a child right by the water. So he said, we help our soul servants, our school nurses. We help them learn to take care of their best friend. The mind, the heart, the body, the soul. And this was just a couple of years ago, and I was listening to him, and it really brought me back to another period of time. And I want to share this story with you. I did live in 1988 when I was 2. What? So I wasn't 2. I was young, though. I was a college student, and I had the opportunity at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon, to go on an overseas study trip. Yeah, Lewis and Clark? My sister, yes. Pio. So I was this young, still not really clear on who I was and what my giftedness was. I mean, it had always burned in me. And I always cared so much about others, but I still was flooded with all these negative ideas about myself, right? I said, I want to go to another country, somewhere as far away from here as I can, a whole nother culture. I didn't know what I was doing, didn't know where I was going, actually. Wasn't very well prepared. It wasn't the day of the internet, so I wasn't on there learning about the country I was going to. I just knew I had signed up for the Nepal trip, right? I said, cool, sounds cool. I was thinking maybe Naples, Italy. I said, cool, some Mediterranean stuff. I could do that. Eat some olives by the shore. I don't know. Soon enough, I learned, what? I'm going to be literally on the other side of the world. And I'm not going to be in the Mediterranean climate. I'm going to be in the Himalayas. Yes, I'm going to be freezing my black butt off. I said, okay, that's cool. I can deal with that. I said to myself, this is going to be all right, though. It's going to be a whole new learning experience for me. And this is what spite will get you. I was thinking, because I still, in my life experience, had, and it continued at Lewis and Clark, but had been primarily surrounded by white folks in my life. And so the attention was always on me, because I was always this little, I was the token, is the term, right? So it was just like physically, wherever I went, people were staring, because I stood out. And I was thinking to myself, oh, we're going to Nepal. That's there between China and India. And those people all have brown skin. Cool. For the first time, I'm going to get over there and no one's going to pay attention to me. That's what I was thinking, right? That's what I was thinking. Spite. Watch Spite. Watch it. George Lopez says, watch out. We were 25 students and they were all Caucasian. And so I was thinking they're going to finally be stared at. They're going to learn what it's like to have everybody tripping on them constantly, 24/7. That's what I'm thinking. We get off the plane. We get down there in that airport, go through security. We go out onto the streets of Kathmandu. Any of you been to Kathmandu? Okay, 1, That's a crazy place. To Kathmandu. It's teeming with human beings. And it's beautiful, though. The diversity is ridiculous. I'm talking about the ethnic, cultural, religious diversity. People from the hills and the villages all down in town and market. But we get out on the street, 25 of us, and it felt like the entire city of Kathmandu within 10 minutes was standing around me in a circle. And they're all very diminutive people. They're down here. So they're all standing around me doing this. I thought it was Gulliver's Travels all of a sudden. I mean, I thought, what's going on here, man? I felt like Shaquille O'Neal up in like the 3rd grade. And they were like literally doing that. And it took a while before I realized in Nepal, they don't consider staring unpolite. And so they weren't like trying to hide it. They were dragging their children like it was the zoo. They're like, come on, come see this. Come see this. And it was like a day at the zoo. And they were standing around me, just staring at me. I look over at 24 of my classmates, right? Not a single person is even paying any attention to them. And then I finally, I started asking about that. Why is everybody tripping on me? I thought I was cool for once. I thought I was going to get away with it. And then I finally realized, they broke it down to me that, hey, man, people over here are used to folks from the United States and Europe coming over to Kathmandu to do their trekking up into the mountains. And they never seen you before, though. They don't even have a concept of African American. They hardly had a concept of Africa. This is a small landlocked nation between two superpowers, India and China. And in some ways very self-contained other than the trekking industry. And so it was crazy. For the rest of the time that I was living there, everywhere I went on my little Indian-made bicycle, and I do mean little, it was meant for like 150 pounds or less, not 250 or more. So that thing was breaking down like every 10 feet. There I am on my bicycle, my knees up at my face. And everywhere I went, they were so proud because they knew the names of 3 African Americans and they were trying to connect with me. So everywhere I went, there were Nepalese people shouting out, Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan, Mike Tyson. And they were really proud too. I said, God bless you. They're beautiful people. They're very open, very humble, and unpretentious. While I was there, I got to study Tibetan medicine. I wanted to understand something. Already intuitively, I sensed that our society in the United States could be healthier, emotionally and spiritually. Our children, instead of looking like ghouls and zombies at school half the time, like when I was a professor at Howard, your students became my students. You understand that, right? They would come from K through 12, and then they would be at 18 years old or what have you, right there up the street. And, some things were predictable. One, all of the young ladies would sit in the front of the big lecture hall, and all of the young men would sit in the back. The young ladies would be engaged. It's just much like this room right here. The young ladies would be engaged, and the brothers would be in the back sleeping, like feet kicked up on the seat in front of them, chilling, They had been doing this the night before. I don't know what they were doing. They certainly looked like it, right? That's how the semester started. So I understood there's something going on with our boys in our educational process. There's a vast disconnect, and the light's going out, and we got to get a handle on that. But the other thing I noticed was just that in general, our young people are not as alive as they should be. They kind of walk around looking a lot like us. And that's not good either, right? I mean, and so I'm over in Nepal, and this was currently materially the poorest nation on the planet at the time. It was still a kingdom back then. In Kathmandu, you would have children, they would be defecating in the streets because there was no real plumbing and sewage system. The homes didn't have anything like that. You would squat down over a hole. So they were all out in the street doing that. Then the monsoons would come, the rains would come, and the streets would flood because there was no irrigation going on. Then those same children going to school every day, if they were lucky enough to go to school, they would be usually late, because first what they would do is they'd go out into that flooded street and they would fish. They were trying to bring food home to their family. That was the water that they were fishing in and feeding off of their families. And so this was Nepal. The real Nepal, not the tourist Nepal. And it was the same out in the villages too, away from the city. Just dire poverty. But I noticed immediately when I got there, there's a spark in the eyes of these children and these people, right? There's like a vitality. They had nothing, but they exuded an energy that would suggest they had everything. And here I am, a young person from the United States, and I felt, wow, we're a country that supposedly has everything. Why do so many of us walk around as though we have nothing? That whole concept of what does it gain a person, or what does it profit a person to gain the world and lose his or her soul? So I asked these Tibetan doctors, because all the students had to do research, independent research, while we were there. And I asked the doctors, I chose to do Tibetan holistic medicine because I wanted to learn more about their healing practice culturally. How do you, not just in terms of physical, medical considerations, but the emotional and spiritual and cognitive, the whole child. How do you address the well-being of these children in a country where you have so little? If you want to talk about budget cuts and a poor economy and no training and programs and resources, wow. But you're doing something, because these children seem to have there's something in their step. There's an energy. So what's going on? And I sat at the foot of these Tibetan doctors for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, because I emphasize the length of time, because it's a whole different pace of life over there. Pace of lice too. But we just had tea. You know that concept, 3 cups of tea, culturally? First cup, we go from being strangers to being familiar. Second cup of tea we have together, we go from being familiar to being friends. Third cup of tea, we go from being friends to being family. And once we're family, we can trust each other and believe in each other and share with each other. And so the Tibetan doctors, and they drink their chai, their duchia, they drink that stuff 6-8 times a day, right? And I just simply asked them to share with me, how do you go about being a healer in your society and your culture? And they shared a few things with me that were very simple on the surface, very profound underneath, that really opened my eyes as I came back to the United States, and have really had it in mind ever since, as I've been living my life and as I've been serving you all who are serving our young. And the doctor said a few things as a pattern over and over again. One of the first things they said was, in your country, they're very humble people, they said, in your country, you're the United States, you're a great country, and you have so much going for you, but we've noticed, and they had been over here, they said, we noticed that the way that you go about honoring each other and being healers is different than the way we do it. In your culture, you seem to set up a hierarchy. And they use as an example medical doctors. And they said, you have people that you call doctors, and these are supposed to be your healers. And they sit at the top of the mountain. And then you have people that you call patients that need healing, supposedly. And they are at the bottom of the mountain. And you set up your system so that for them to access the healer, they've got to climb a mountain of paperwork, bureaucracy, insurance, processes, scheduling. When they finally get to the office of the healer, the doctor, they're immediately made uncomfortable, not relaxed, which is what we need for healing, right? We need the relaxed spirit and nervous system and muscularity and brain. The cerebral frontal cortex must be awake, and the adrenaline brain, the fight or flight brain, must be asleep, so that we can do problem solving together, so that we can be visionary and creative and really communicate from our best self. We notice that you have it set up that way. So immediately, because you have the doctor saying, I'm a doctor and I have the knowledge, and you train your doctors to think that way, and you have people who come to the doctor because you call them patients, the doctor immediately loses patience with the patient. And so the patient comes to the doctor's office, feels uncomfortable because the patient senses that the doctor has a stack and is rushing to get through as many patients as possible during the day. They're describing a model of medical practice and healing. They said, your doctor does not go into a process of beginning to learn who the patient is. The doctor, you might be fortunate as a patient to have the doctor actually look up and look at you. You might be fortunate. You might be surprised. The doctor actually looks at you. The doctor then is focused on determining to some degree what your symptomology is, so that the doctor can apply a pharmacology. Symptomology to pharmacology, and then scoot, 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 out the door. Because you've treated the symptomology and not the etiology, the patient then undoubtedly returns for more pharmacology, and your system goes round and round and round. They said that system has some advantages, but we would like to share with you what we've learned from a few thousand years of culture. We've learned that to be a healer, we must believe in the capacity of the one to be healed. To be healed, we must have a fervent belief that whatever needs strengthening within the child, that child can, as an authority over his own or her own healing process, an ambassador over her own healing process, that child can achieve success, efficacy. We've learned that as a healer, if we don't believe in the child's ability to be well and stay well and learn and blossom and grow, then we're not really a healer at all. The Tibetan doctor said, what we do is when a person comes to us, we don't call them a patient. We say to ourselves, I am blessed. A teacher has come to my life. That's what we do. So whether it's a child or an adult, that person that comes into our office, we recognize as a teacher who has blessed our life. Because we recognize that a human being of any age is a representative of an entire three-dimensional human life that has been lived, is being lived, and is on the way to being lived. And that if we humble ourselves, we can learn all that we need in order to be a healer for that human life. Chief Crow in this nation said, in you are natural powers. You already possess everything necessary to be great. And so if he were here today with us, he would be saying to you, regardless of the support that you receive at your school or in your school district, regardless of the resources, the paycheck, the appreciation or lack of it, regardless of the communication or lack of it, regardless of the, quote, caseload, the ratio of students to nurse, regardless of all of these conditionalities, you were born to be a healer, therefore you were born with everything inside of you necessary to be great at your craft of healing. The Tibetan doctors concur. And they said, what we do is we simply ask the person, we say, thank you for coming to us, my teacher. Will you please teach me about your life? Please teach me who you are. And over a period of weeks and months, if necessary, that person, whether it's a child or an adult, shares. The Tibetan healer, nurse, doctor, wants to know the journey, wants to know what the child has come from, who the child is a part of, who the child has descended from. What is the child thinking day to day, feeling day to day, dealing with day to day? What is the child going home to? What is the child encountering on the schoolyard, in the classroom? How is the child making sense of the curriculum, the material? How does the child feel at the end of the day versus the beginning of the day? How does the child learn to pay attention to her body communication and conversation? Because her body is trying to tell her something about her state of being at the beginning and the end of the day. All of these things is what the Tibetan nurse, doctor, practitioner wants to compassionately receive through a process of listening, skilled listening. So the Tibetan doctor doesn't start off under the assumption that I know something, that I have knowledge. The Tibetan doctor does just the opposite. He says, even with all my training and education and experience and practice, in this moment, I know nothing. I rely on my instinct to be the foundation of this service. I rely on my education and my training to be of support. But I tell myself in terms of identity, I know nothing. Because the more that I believe that I have something to learn, the more I am going to learn from the student, from the child. I'm going to listen instead of having paradigm make me blind to what might be going on with the child. This is what they're teaching me. This is what they're telling me. The other thing that the Tibetan doctors finished with was this. Inevitably, every one of them, they said, we keep it very simple in our culture. We've learned simplicity helps. We learned that through our generations and our millennia, that life can be described this way. Health and healing is energy and motion. Illness and disease and unwellness, or lack of wellness, or descent into unwellness, is energy blocked. Energy in motion, energy blocked. We understand that our job as a healer is to be a facilitator of helping the other person remove the obstructions that are blocking their energy, blocking their emotional energy, their heart energy, their intelligence and creative energy, their spirit energy, their muscular, nervous energy. If the child comes to us tense, we understand that the challenge is to help the child relieve and release the obstructions that are causing the tension. The tension is keeping the child from learning and thriving and growing. It's like a river, and it's either flowing or it's not. The healer understands where to go in the river to find the obstruction and help the person get it out of the river so that they can flow again. And the last thing that they shared with me was that they said, we understand this truth. What applies to the one being healed applies to the one healing. Because we are also human beings, we need to practice on a daily basis, becoming better at doing interior assessment, taking stock. Any of you ever worked in retail? Show of hands. Maybe when you were young? Come on, don't be afraid to admit it. And did any of you have to go and do stock? You remember what that was like? It wasn't fun, right? It wasn't the most glorious, spectacular activity. But the Tibetan doctors say, unless we as the healer know what is going on inside of us, how can we be sure that we are actually at our best? That we are delivering the sediment of our own healing giftedness down our river and into that delta, that ocean that is the child. And so on a daily basis, our priority is not first, how can I help our children in the school be healthier? Our first daily priority as our foundation is, what can I continue to do or begin to do to make myself healthy and flowing and open? Because that will ensure that I have everything operating that I need to in order to be a soul servant for these children. A medical servant for these children, a health servant. I feel in the United States of America, you all understand this intuitively. I feel there's a lot of preaching to the choir that I am doing in sharing this with you. But in our United States of America, the culture does not encourage you to take the time to nurse yourself. The culture doesn't. And what I mean by the culture is our values and the way that our systems are set up in our school districts and our schools and our school day and the tasks and job responsibilities. You are not encouraged to nurse yourself. People probably would look at you crazy if you started doing certain things that you really need to do for yourself while you're in the school during the day. Right? Think of what you would do if you went to a spa. If you did any of those things during the school day, like in your office, they'd be writing you up. They'd be calling you like, okay, we need to do a little evaluation on you. We need to do some professional development because you're getting a little loopy on us, right? I'm here as a child who was blessed by your kind soul and your compassion to remind you that you need to take care of yourself. In Africa, in the old African traditions, there were often communities where when the woman became pregnant, she would gather all the females in her life. They would go out in the woods, and in a female circle of womanhood, they would go about learning to identify and recognize the song of the new life. The song, meaning they would literally start to sing intuitively what this child was expressing to them. For us, we can think of it metaphorically. The child's persona, purpose, essence, reason for being, raison d'être. What they would do is they would learn the song well enough so that they could come back to the community, to the slow folks, the men, and they would say, a new life is on its way. Go get the drum. This new life has taught us her song so far, and this is how we know it. And they would start singing it so that all of the people in the community would know it. Then, imagine this wherever you come from, imagine this in your school and in your community. They would learn the song that the child was telling them she was well enough that when she was born, she would be greeted by them singing her song. When she learned to walk, crawl, walk, talk, they would be singing her song, rite of passage, celebration of her, saying, we see you, we celebrate you, you're beautiful, we need you as part of us, you're part of that whole, that belongingness, that children need that sense of belongingness. If she was a girl, when she had her first menstruation, instead of being in a culture that made her feel ashamed of that, they would sing to her saying, you are becoming a portal for life and generations. You're becoming a woman. This is something beautiful. Don't ever be ashamed. They would sing it to her literally. But not their song, her song, that she had been teaching them by exuding who she truly was. When she became married, they'd sing her song. When she became a mother, they would sing her song. Every time she had a child by birth or otherwise, they would sing her song. When she became an elder and when she crossed over the River Jordan, when she changed to light, when she passed on, they would be singing her song. Imagine if we could create in our schools and our communities an experience for our children where wherever they go, all of the grown folks are singing their song. Meaning to say, we see you, we recognize you, we care enough about you to pay attention to who you are telling us you are. Imagine what those children would be like. And lastly, imagine what you would be like. Imagine what you would be feeling like if you learned to sing your own song. Not every now and then, but 24/7. Not just when you're at a conference like this, your yearly sort of drink of that restorative water, but daily, at work, at home, in the car, constantly, you are remembering who you truly are, what you were born to be, the greatness of your heart, your capacity for this. I want to leave you with this absolute adulation that comes from me. And on behalf of all the thousands of children that I spend time with really around the world who have said the same things to me about the certain adult in their life, in their school, who showed them warmth and kindness and slowed down and didn't rush them for once and asked them how they were feeling for once and how they were doing. All of these children who are imprinted and impacted by you and your beauty, I just want you to know as you leave this conference in this Washington, D.C., how great you are. And not only how great you are, but how every moment of your service, you leave your greatness in your wake so that a child like me can lap it up and taste just a moment of sweetness. I love you. I believe in you. I recognize that you were born for this sacred task. I have all faith in you. I have faith in you. And I pray that you will do the work so that you have faith in yourself, meaning that you will remember your true nature and hold on to that, because it's all the power that you will ever need. I love you. I thank you so much for your service. I thank you so much for your personality, your compassion, your feistiness, your determination to make things right in the lives of our children. Thank you for receiving this inspiration. I love you.